The clink of fine crystal glass sounded like breaking ice in the quiet, dim room of the restaurant. Chloe slammed a thick white folder onto the dark mahogany table, right between my half-empty water glass and her untouched glass of red wine. Her golden bracelet rattled against the wood. "Sign it, Julian," Chloe said, her voice sharp and loud enough to turn a few heads at the nearby tables. "I am not going to waste another single day of my youth waiting for you to become someone." I looked down at the document. The bold black letters at the top read, "Marital Dissolution and Settlement Agreement." Sitting right beside her was Carter Sterling. He wore a navy Italian silk suit that probably cost more than the average worker made in 3 months. His expensive gold watch caught the warm overhead light as he casually draped an arm over the back of Chloe's chair. "Go on, man, open it," Carter chuckled, leaning forward with a lazy, arrogant smile. "Don't pretend you can't read legal English. Page 3 is the part you really need to look at." I didn't answer. I didn't flinch. I slowly reached out, flipped to page 3, and traced my thumb down the crisp, white paper. "A exit penalty fee," I said quietly, my voice steady and flat. $1 million. "It's not a penalty, Julian. It's compensation," Chloe sneered, leaning over the table, her eyes filled with cold disgust. 3 years. 3 whole years I gave you. I took you into my family's home when you had nothing. You cooked, you cleaned, you folded laundry, and you acted like a house husband while my father stressed over his business. You added 0 value to my life. You want me to pay you $1 million for the privilege of being divorced by you?" I asked, looking up from the paper to meet her gaze directly. "No, Julian, you don't get it," Carter interrupted, tapping his silver pen against his wine glass. "She wants $1 million because you held her back from real society. Look at you. You're wearing a $50 jacket from a department store. You drive a 10-year-old sedan. You don't belong in Chloe's world." "I do. Carter's father owns Sterling Financial." "Julian," Chloe said proudly, reaching over to place her hand over Carter's manicured fingers. "He bought me this diamond necklace last night. What have you ever bought me? A cheap silver ring from a local market. I gave you my time, Chloe," I said softly. "I took care of your home so you could build your career. Time means nothing when you have no money." Chloe snapped, her hands balling into tight fists. "My father is working 18 hours a day to expand his logistics, and my husband is at home baking bread. Do you know how embarrassing that is when I talk to my friends? They laugh at me." "She's right, Julian," Carter said, his smile widening as he pulled a black fountain pen from his breast pocket and tossed it onto the folder. "Be a man for once in your life. Sign the papers, agree to the debt terms, and walk away. Or do you want to beg? Go ahead, beg her to stay. I'll give you $500 just to watch you cry." The waiter hesitated near our table, sensing the tension, but Carter waved him away with a sharp flick of his hand. I looked at the black fountain pen lying on the paper. My heart rate didn't spike. My hands didn't shake. Inside my mind, a strange, absolute silence settled in. The 3 years of pretending to be a simple, ordinary man, the years of quietly managing my global investment firm from a laptop in the guest room while letting them treat me like a nobody, were officially over. "If I sign this right now," I said, looking Chloe dead in the eye, "you realize our marriage is legally over the second the clerk stamps it tomorrow morning." "That is the best news I've heard all year," Chloe said coldly. "Sign it, or my family's lawyers will drag you through court until you don't even have shoes on your feet. You'll end up homeless on the street, begging for scraps." "You really think I'm the one who will be begging?" I asked quietly. "Of course you will," she laughed bitterly. "Without the Hayes family, you are absolute zero. You have no house, no income, and no future." I picked up the fountain pen. The cool metal felt smooth in my hand. Without another word, I flipped to the final page, signed my name in neat, firm strokes, and capped the pen with a soft click. I pushed the folder back across the polished, dark table. "You want $1 million to leave me, Chloe?" I said, my voice dropping an octave, carrying a cold weight that made her laughter die in her throat. "Fine, but make sure you count every single cent, because after tonight, you won't see another dollar for the rest of your life." Carter snorted, grabbing the folder and checking the signature. Big words for a guy with an empty bank account. Come on, Chloe. Let's leave this loser to pay his own water bill. Enjoy the rain, Julian, Chloe said, standing up and smoothing down her red dress without looking at me again. Don't bother coming back to the estate tonight. Your clothes are already packed in a box outside the garage. They turned and walked toward the glowing VIP exit, Carter's hand resting smugly on her waist. I sat alone for 3 seconds. Then, I stood up, walked out the heavy front doors of the restaurant, and stepped straight into the pouring night rain. The cold water hit my face, washing away the last remnant of my patience. I reached into my inner jacket pocket, pulled out a second phone, a custom, encrypted dark device, and swiped the screen awake. I dialed the speed key and placed the phone in my ear. It rang once. Mr. Vance, a sharp professional voice answered instantly. We have been waiting for your call. Marcus, I said, watching Carter's sports car pull out of the valet drive across the street. Execute Protocol 0 on the Hayes estate and Sterling Financial. Direct acquisition, sir? Marcus asked, his tone crisp and unhesitating. By every debt note, every mortgage, and every credit line held by Richard Hayes, I commanded coldly, stepping into the dark alley where my private black sedan pulled up to the curb. I want full ownership of everything they own before the sun comes up. Consider it done, Mr. Vance. The heavy door of the blacked-out luxury SUV closed with a quiet thud, shutting out the sound of the rain. Marcus Thorne sat in the leather captain's chair opposite me, holding a lit tablet screen in his hands. He wore a sharp gray suit with a silver lapel pin shaped like an anvil, the private mark of Vance Holdings. Good evening, Mr. Vance, Marcus said, handing me a crystal glass of chilled mineral water. I take it the dinner was short? Short enough, I replied, taking a small sip. Chloe brought Carter Sterling along to validate her life choices. She handed me a settlement agreement and demanded $1 million exit fee. Marcus let out a short, dry laugh as he opened a thick leather binder. $1 million? That is remarkably ambitious for a family sitting on the edge of complete bankruptcy. Explain, I said, leaning forward. What is Richard's exact exposure? Marcus tilted the tablet toward me, showing long lines of red figures, property deeds, and high-interest corporate loans. Richard Hayes is drowning, Julian, Marcus said flatly. Hayes Logistics expanded too fast last spring. To cover operational losses, Richard took out $14 million in private loans from secondary lenders. He pledged everything as collateral: the trucks, the warehouses, and the family estate. $14 million? I asked, scanning the numbers on the screen. Who holds the primary notes? Apex Capital held $11 million of it, Marcus explained, pointing to a highlighted signature page. The remaining $3 million is spread across short-term high-interest lenders. Apex sent Richard a formal default warning last Tuesday. He has less than 10 days before they initiate foreclosure proceedings against his home. Does Chloe know about this? I asked, looking up from the documents. Not a single word, Marcus replied. Richard has been hiding the notices in his private office safe. In fact, right now, they're holding a victory dinner at the Hayes Mansion to celebrate your divorce. A celebration dinner? I echoed quietly. Yes, sir, Marcus said, pulling up a live audio feed on his phone from the mansion's dining room. Our security team confirmed Carter Sterling arrived there 20 minutes ago with a crate of expensive champagne. Through the speaker, Richard's boisterous voice cut through the static. Asterisk to smart moves. Asterisk, Richard roared over the sound of clinking glasses. Asterisk, Chloe, getting rid of that deadweight husband was the best decision you ever made. A house husband who couldn't even bring home a $50,000 salary. Asterisk, Dad, you didn't even argue. Chloe's voice chimed in with a laugh. Asterisk, he just signed the paper. Carter made him feel so small he could barely speak. Asterisk, the guy's a nobody, Richard. Carter added smugly over the mic. Asterisk, tomorrow morning, my father's bank will process the loan extension for Hayes Logistics. With Julian out of the picture, your family's profile looks infinitely better to our board. Asterisk, thank you, Carter, Chloe said, her tone dripping with affection. Asterisk, I knew a real man would step up when I needed one. Asterisk. Marcus reached over and muted the audio feed. The silence inside the SUV returned, heavy and absolute. They really believe Carter's family is going to save them, Marcus noted, observing my expression closely. Are you all right, Julian? After 3 years of supporting them in silence, hearing this must. It brings clarity, Marcus, I interrupted, my voice dropping into a register of icy precision. 3 years ago, I promised my late mother I would live a quiet, humble life for a while to understand people without my wealth getting in the way. I gave Chloe my sincerity. She chose to measure my worth in brand names and bank balances. So, the restraint is off? Marcus asked, his eyes glinting with professional anticipation. Completely, I said. Tell me about Apex Capital's position on Richard's default notes. Apex is nervous, Marcus said instantly. They know Hayes Logistics is a sinking ship. They want cash now. If someone offered to buy out Richard's debt at face value tonight, Apex would sign the transfer paperwork within 20 minutes. What about the high-interest secondary lenders? I asked. They're even more desperate, Marcus replied. They know if Apex forecloses first, they won't recover a single penny. Good, I said, setting the glass of water down in the cup holder. Here are your instructions. Vance Holdings will buy out every single piece of paper Richard Hayes ever signed. Marcus opened a secure ledger app on his tablet. All $14 million, sir. All $14 million, I confirmed. I want the personal guarantee notes, the corporate equipment liens, and the primary deed of trust for the mansion. Buy out Apex, buy out the secondary lenders, and consolidate the entire debt under Vance Holdings. If we move right now, Marcus noted, tapping swiftly on his screen, we can wire the funds through our offshore accounts. The legal assignment of the mortgage can be fully recorded before the county clerk's office opens tomorrow morning. Make it happen, I said. And what about Sterling Financial? Marcus asked. Carter promised Richard a loan extension from his father's bank. Carter's father relies on our private liquidity fund for 40% of his bank's capital, I said coldly. Call our treasurer. Tell him to freeze Sterling Financial's credit facility effective at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. That will cripple Carter's authority instantly. Marcus smiled softly. He won't be able to approve a loan for a bicycle, let alone a failing logistics company. Chloe wanted me to pay $1 million penalty to leave her life, I said, staring out the darkened window at the city lights reflecting off the wet asphalt. She thinks money defines power. She is about to learn a very expensive lesson in who actually holds it. Marcus added, clicking a final confirmation button on his tablet screen. The funds are moving now, Julian. The debt buyouts are 60% complete. By dawn, you will officially be Richard Hayes' sole creditor. Marcus, I said, turning to him with a calm, unyielding glare. Don't leave them a single loophole. Buy every debt note her father signed. I want to own the roof over their heads by sunrise. Understood, Mr. Vance, Marcus replied, lowering his head respectfully. Where shall I drop you off tonight? The Grand Imperial Hotel, I said, settling back into the leather seat as the SUV pulled out into the night. It's time I step back into my real life. Hashtag Chapter 3, The Hidden Hand Moves. The heavy wooden front door of the Hayes estate felt different under my hand this morning. It no longer felt like a home. I unlocked the door with my spare key and stepped into the grand marble foyer. Sunlight poured through the tall glass windows, casting long shadows across the empty space. The house was deathly quiet, save for the hum of the air conditioning system. I walked up the carpeted stairs toward the guest bedroom, where I had spent the last 3 years keeping out of Chloe's way. I didn't need much. I picked up a simple canvas duffel bag from the edge of the bed and packed only what truly belonged to me. A few plain shirts, my mother's vintage silver watch, and 3 leather-bound journals containing my private investment notes. As I zipped the bag shut and turned toward the hallway, a soft voice stopped me in my tracks. Julian? I turned to see Grace standing in the doorway. Chloe's 19-year-old sister wore an oversized sweater and held a stack of college textbooks against her chest. Her eyes were red, her face filled with genuine sorrow. Good morning, Grace, I said softly, setting the bag down by my feet. Are you really leaving? She asked, her voice trembling slightly as she stepped into the room. I saw your box of clothes by the garage last night. Chloe told Dad that you signed the papers without even putting up a fight. It was time, Grace, I replied, meeting her anxious gaze. The marriage was over long before last night. We both know that. Grace dropped her gaze to the floor, biting her lower lip nervously. I feel so ashamed, Julian. I tried to talk to Chloe last night, after Carter left. I told her she was making a terrible mistake, but she just laughed at me. You don't have to apologize for your sister's choices, I said gently. None of this is your fault. It is our fault, Grace insisted, looking up at me with tear-filled eyes. My family treated you like a servant for 3 whole years. Dad made you handle all the household maintenance while he ignored his own debts. Chloe spent tens of thousands of dollars on luxury bags and blamed you for not having a career. But you were the only one who ever took care of this house. You cooked for us when Dad was sick, you helped me with my tuition forms, and you never asked for anything in return. I did it because I cared about keeping peace in this family, Grace, I said, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. But some people confuse patience with weakness. Where are you going to go? She asked, wiping a stray tear from her cheek. Do you have enough money for a hotel? I have some savings in my personal account from my part-time job. I could transfer it to you right now if... Keep your money, Grace, I interrupted with a small, warm smile. Believe me, I will be just fine. Julian, Carter Sterling is a bad man, Grace whispered, stepping closer and lowering her voice. He was whispering to Dad in the study last night. He promised Dad a huge bank loan, but only if Dad publicly cuts all ties with you. They are planning to drag your name through the mud if you try to ask for alimony. Let them try, I said calmly. Before Grace could say another word, sharp high heels clicked loudly against the marble hallway outside. Chloe stepped into the doorway, holding a steaming porcelain cup of dark coffee. She wore a sleek silk robe, her long blonde hair styled perfectly despite the early hour. Oh, look at this tender little moment, Chloe sneered, leaning against the doorframe and taking a slow sip from her cup. Are you begging my little sister for subway fare, Julian? Grace spun around, her face flushing red. Chloe, stop it. How can you be so cruel to him after everything he did for us? Shut up, Grace, Chloe snapped, casting a cold glare at her sister. You're 19 and naive. You don't know how the real world works. Men like Julian are bloodsuckers. They attach themselves to wealthy families and leech off their hard work until they get kicked to the curb. I picked up my duffel bag and adjusted the strap over my shoulder, staring back at her without a single trace of anger. Look at that pathetic little bag, Chloe scoffed, pointing her polished red fingernail at my luggage. Is that really all you're taking? Where is your dignity, Julian? You didn't even hire a lawyer to fight for half the house. This house was built on your father's promises, Chloe, I said quietly. It doesn't belong to me. You're damn right it doesn't. Chloe barked, letting out a sharp, arrogant laugh. My father worked 20 years for this estate. Carter's father is refinancing our business loan this afternoon. By next week, Hayes Logistics will be launching a brand new fleet of trucks, and I will be sitting in Carter's penthouse down the street. Is that what Carter told you? I asked. Carter has real power, Julian. Chloe sneered, stepping closer and thrusting her coffee cup toward my face. He doesn't sit around reading old books like you. He makes moves. He gets things done. Now get out of my hallway before I call security to drag you off the driveway. I ignored her completely and turned my attention back to Grace, who was standing quietly behind her sister with her head bowed. Grace, I said, my tone switching back to calm authority. Do you have your laptop, your birth certificate, and your college records saved on a private drive? Grace blinked in surprise, looking up at me. Yes, I keep all my important documents in my school backpack. Good, I nodded. Make sure you take that bag with you when you leave for classes today. Don't leave your personal belongings in this house tonight. Chloe burst into a loud, hysterical laugh, almost spilling her coffee across the hardwood floor. What are you talking about, you lunatic? Are you predicting rain? This is my family's estate. Nothing is happening to this house. I stepped past Chloe, my shoulder brushing lightly against her silk robe as I made my way toward the top of the stairs. I paused right at the landing, looking back over my shoulder into her arrogant eyes. "Laugh all you want, Chloe," I said, my voice cutting through the silent house like a razor blade. "Enjoy the house while the sun is still up. The shadows in this hallway are going to get very long, very fast. Get out, you penniless loser," Chloe screamed, throwing her coffee cup against the wall. I walked down the stairs and stepped out into the morning air. Marcus Thorne stood by the luxury sedan at the bottom of the driveway. "The debt buyouts are fully registered, Mr. Vance," Marcus announced. "You now hold 100% of the Hayes family's debt notes." "Excellent," I said, tossing my bag into the trunk. "Let's see how long Carter's promises last." I sat back in the plush leather armchair inside Marcus's private monitoring suite, swirling 2 fingers of scotch as I watched the live feed from Sterling Financial's executive office. Through the hidden lens, Richard Hayes looked like a drowning man grasping at straws, clutching his worn leather folder opposite Carter Sterling. "Carter, my boy, I need this credit line executed today," Richard said, his voice trembling across the feed. Apex Capital sent another formal notice. "If I don't inject $5 million into Hayes Logistics by 3 o'clock, they freeze our primary operational accounts." Carter leaned back in his high-back chair, propping his designer shoes onto the mahogany desk. He twirled a gold fountain pen with infuriating arrogance. "Relax, Richard," Carter chuckled, waving a dismissive hand. "You're dealing with Sterling Financial now. My family controls 40% of commercial lending in this city. Chloe told me how stressed you were last night, and I promised her I'd handle this. So the loan is approved?" Richard asked, leaning forward desperately. "It's practically signed," Carter boasted, sliding a crisp document across the desk. "We are restructuring your whole liability package. We'll absorb your $14 million debt, kick Apex out of the picture, and issue a fresh $6 million credit line for your new trucks." "Thank God," Richard exhaled, wiping his brow with a handkerchief. "Thank God for you, Carter. Chloe made the right choice dumping that penniless househusband. Julian would have watched us go under without lifting a finger." "Julian is a nobody, Richard," Carter sneered. "He leech-fed off your family for 3 years. Men like him don't understand real capital." Before Richard could touch the pen to paper, the heavy mahogany door swung open. Eleanor Sterling, Carter's mother and senior vice chairwoman of the bank, marched into the room. Her face was ghastly pale, her tailored gray suit coat unbuttoned, and her hand shook violently around a thick stack of financial cables. "Carter!" Eleanor barked, her voice striking the glass walls. "Stop what you are doing right now." Carter blinked, slowly lowering his feet. "Mom, what are you doing in here?" "I'm signing a major restructuring deal with Richard." "There is no restructuring." Eleanor snapped, ripping the paper right out from under Richard's hands. "Step away from that desk." "Mom, what is wrong with you?" Carter demanded, standing up straight as anger flushed his neck. "I gave Richard my personal word. My board authorization allows me to sign commercial lines up to $10 million. Your board authorization was revoked 10 minutes ago." Eleanor shouted, slamming a red-stamped ledger sheet down. "Our corporate treasury just received an emergency freeze order from our primary clearinghouse." Richard jumped out of his chair, his eyes wide. "A freeze order? Mrs. Sterling, what does that mean for my company's loan extension?" "It means it's dead, Mr. Hayes," Eleanor said, turning to him with razor-sharp panic. "Sterling Financial relies on a private institutional vault. That vault just terminated our standing liquidity facility without notice." "Who terminated it?" Carter yelled, grabbing the paper. "Who has the authority to block a Sterling transaction?" "Vance Holdings," Eleanor whispered, her confidence completely shattered. "The parent fund backing 40% of our bank's capital. Their legal team just executed a total collateral recall. We don't have $5 million to lend you, Carter. We don't have $500,000. "Vance Holdings," Richard stuttered, his knees buckling as he gripped the edge of the desk. "I've never even heard of them. Why target my business loans?" "They didn't just target your loans, Richard," Eleanor said, pulling a legal notice from her binder and slapping it against his chest. "Look at the header. Vance Holdings didn't just freeze our bank. They spent the last 12 hours buying out every single default note you owed to Apex Capital and your secondary lenders. What? Carter gasped, scanning the pages over Richard's shoulder. That's impossible. Apex demanded $14 million in liquid cash to transfer those notes. Nobody liquidates $14 million overnight. What do you mean the debt was bought out, Eleanor? Richard screamed, his face twisting in blind panic. Who has $14 million to liquidate my family estate overnight? Vance Holdings cleared it in cash. Eleanor barked at her son. They now hold 100% of Richard's corporate liens, his equipment mortgages, and the primary deed of trust for the Hayes estate. No, Apex gave me 10 days. Richard mumbled, falling backward into his chair. Apex doesn't own you anymore, Mr. Hayes. Eleanor stated coldly. Vance Holdings does, and they just issued an immediate notice of acceleration. Your entire $14 million debt is due in full by 3 o'clock today. I'll call our attorneys. Carter shouted, grabbing his desk phone with shaking hands. I'll call my contacts at the Federal Reserve. I'll call the managing director at Vance directly. Don't bother, Carter, Eleanor said bitterly, tapping the bottom line. Every door is shut. The recall was signed directly by the principal owner. Carter stared down at the bold signature at the bottom of the page. The blood drained from his face until he looked like a ghost. Julian, Vance? Carter whispered, his voice cracking. Who the hell is Julian Vance? Eleanor demanded. Richard pulled out his cell phone with trembling hands, pressing speed dial as tears welled in his eyes. He put it on speaker, his voice shrill with hysteria as Chloe answered on the first ring. Chloe, Richard sobbed into the phone. Call Carter. Tell him to do something. An offshore buyer just bought our house and company. They're repossessing everything we own by 3 o'clock. On my side of the screen, I took a slow, satisfying sip of my scotch and set the glass down. Marcus, I said quietly, without breaking my gaze from the monitor, send the sheriffs to serve the eviction notice. I sat in the back of my luxury sedan, watching through tinted glass as heavy rain poured over the long driveway of the Hayes estate. On the tablet in my lap, the internal security feed showed the chaos unfolding inside the living room. Richard paced the room like a trapped animal, clutching a half-empty glass of whiskey. Carter was furiously dialing numbers on his phone, only to slam it down in frustration after every attempt. Chloe stood by the grand fireplace, her face pale, her hands trembling as she smoothed down her silk dress. Nothing. Carter spat, kicking a designer footstool. My father's attorneys won't pick up. The managing director of the clearing house blocked my cell. Do something, Carter, Chloe yelled, her voice high and panicked. You told my father this morning that your family controlled the whole financial sector. You said you'd protect us. I'm trying, Chloe. Carter snapped, turning on her. Your father owes $14 million to a firm that just froze my family's entire bank. This isn't a simple loan default anymore. What do you mean it's not a simple loan default? Richard shouted, his face turning a deep, dangerous red. You swore Sterling Financial had my back. Now you're telling me your mother can't even override a recall order. Before Carter could reply, 3 loud, thunderous knocks echoed off the heavy double oak front doors, rattling the glass panes. Who is that? Chloe gasped, backing away toward the sofa. Dad, don't open it. Richard swallowed hard, walking stiffly into the grand marble foyer. He pulled open the door to reveal Sheriff Douglas standing on the porch, drenched in the downpour. 4 uniformed deputies stood behind him, carrying metal clipboards and legal execution warrants. Richard Hayes, Sheriff Douglas asked, his voice steady, deep, and utterly devoid of warmth. Yes, Richard stammered, holding the doorframe for support. Sheriff, what is the meaning of this? Why are armed deputies on my porch? I am here to execute a writ of immediate possession, Sheriff Douglas stated clearly, stepping into the foyer. The deputies followed, their boots leaving wet tracks across the white marble. As of 2:30 this afternoon, The title of this property has been officially transferred to Vance Holdings following total debt acceleration. This is insane, Chloe screamed, rushing into the hallway with her arms folded defensively. You can't evict us. Do you know who my father is? Show me the name on that warrant right now. Sheriff Douglas didn't flinch. He handed a thick legal packet to Richard, who took it with hands so unsteady he nearly dropped it. The warrant is signed by a superior court judge, ma'am, Sheriff Douglas said calmly. The new owner of the estate has revoked all residential privileges and ordered an immediate clearance of the premises. Immediately, Chloe shrieked, her voice cracking. It's raining outside. My clothes, my jewelry, my family's belongings are upstairs. We have lived here for 20 years. You have 30 minutes to collect your personal identification and essential items, the sheriff replied, pointing toward the stairs. My deputies will supervise the walkthrough. Anything left behind will be impounded under the foreclosure lien. Carter pushed past Richard, stepping right up into the sheriff's personal space with his chest puffed out. Listen to me, Douglas, Carter barked, raising a finger. I am Carter Sterling of Sterling Financial. My family practically funds your department's annual budget. You walk out those doors right now and give us 24 hours to handle this with our legal team, or I will have your badge by morning. Sheriff Douglas looked down at Carter's hand, then met his eyes with cold indifference. He reached into his coat and pulled out a single sheet of paper, sliding it into Carter's chest. Mr. Sterling, I suggest you read that before you make any more threats, Sheriff Douglas said quietly. That is a formal judicial injunction issued 30 minutes ago. Sterling Financial is strictly barred from intervening in the collateral seizure of this estate due to severe conflicts of interest. Carter stared at the official seal on the paper, his mouth opening and closing without making a sound. The cocky bravado completely evaporated from his face, leaving behind pure, unadulterated fear. Conflicts of interest? Carter whispered, stumbling back a step. How? How did they get a judge to sign an injunction in 2 hours? Because the legal owner presented undeniable proof of predatory lending practices by your institution, Sheriff Douglas answered dryly. Chloe grabbed Carter's arm, shaking him violently. Carter, tell him he's wrong. Tell him we aren't leaving. Shut up, Chloe, Carter yelled, throwing her hand off his arm. Can't you see what's happening? We're finished. The bank is frozen. No, Chloe sobbed, turning back to the officer with tears ruining her makeup. Who is doing this to us? Tell me who bought the house. Show me the landlord's name. Look out the window, ma'am, Sheriff Douglas said, glancing over her shoulder toward the grand entrance. Right on cue, my long black luxury sedan glided up the curving driveway, its headlights cutting through the heavy rain. The car came to a silent stop right in front of the marble steps. Through the glass, I saw Chloe and Richard press themselves against the front windows, their eyes wide with desperate curiosity. Carter stood frozen in the middle of the foyer, his face completely drained of color. Marcus stepped out from the driver's side, opening his umbrella with a crisp snap. He walked around to the passenger door, reaching for the handle. I adjusted my silver watch, smoothed down my suit jacket, and took a deep breath. Time to pay them a visit, I murmured to myself. Marcus opened the door, holding the umbrella high as I stepped out into the rain. Marcus held the dark umbrella steady over my head as I stepped out of the luxury sedan into the driving rain. Flanked by my legal counsel, I walked up the broad stone steps of the Hayes estate, my shoes clicking firmly against the wet pavement. In the grand doorway, Chloe's jaw dropped. Her eyes widened in horror, all the color draining from her face until she looked like a ghost. Richard's knees gave out completely, and he collapsed onto a porch armchair with a broken groan. Beside them, Carter shrank back into the shadows of the foyer, staring at me in total, speech-bound silence. I paused on the top step, reaching into my suit jacket to pull out a document folded inside a leather binder. It was the divorce agreement Chloe had thrown in my face days ago, now countersigned by my attorneys and paired with the certified court eviction order. Julian, Chloe shrieked, stumbling forward onto the porch. Tears streamed down her cheeks, smearing her mascara as she reached out with trembling hands. Julian, please. Tell me this is some kind of sick joke. Tell me you aren't doing this to us. I looked at her with absolute indifference, stepping back just enough so her hands met thin air. It's no joke, Chloe, I said, my voice cutting through the sound of the falling rain. The debt notes have been fully executed. This property belongs to Vance Holdings now. Julian, please, she sobbed, dropping to her knees on the wet stone. It was all a misunderstanding. I didn't mean any of those things I said. I was stressed about the family business. Please, remember our 3 years together. You love me. You cared about this family. I remembered every single day of those 3 years when I signed the buyout. I replied calmly. I remember how your father made me fix his roof while treating me like hired help. I remembered how you spent tens of thousands on designer clothes while calling me a useless, freeloading loser. I was stupid, Chloe wailed, grabbing at the hem of my trousers. I was blind, Julian. We can fix this. We can tear up those divorce papers and start over. You have real power now. We could be a power couple. I looked down at her with cold disgust, sliding the papers neatly back into my coat. Do you remember what you told me right in that guest room 3 years ago? I asked softly. You said, you're too poor to marry into my family. You told me I wasn't worthy to walk on your marble floors. I was wrong, she begged, shaking violently in the rain. I'll do whatever you want. Just don't throw us into the street. You asked for $1 million to leave my life, Chloe, I said, leaning down slightly so she could hear every word clearly. Buying your family's debt cost me $14 million, and it was worth every single penny. Julian, have mercy. Richard choked out from the armchair, his voice cracked with desperate tears. I'm an old man. Where am I supposed to go? You should have thought about that before you pledged your family's home as collateral for fake bank loans, I said, turning my back on him. Marcus gestured to the moving crew waiting by the commercial truck behind us. Begin the clearance, he ordered sharp and clear. Stack all personal property on the curb outside the main gates. Chloe screamed as 2 workers stepped past her, carrying her designer luggage and leather bags down the steps, setting them directly on the wet pavement under the pour of the rain. Stop them, Chloe yelled, scrambling toward her bags. My belongings. You're ruining everything. Behind her, Carter tried to slip quietly down the side steps toward his car, his head bowed. Mr. Sterling, Marcus called out, his voice stopping Carter dead in his tracks. Carter froze, slowly turning around with a terrified look in his eyes. Don't bother driving to your office, Marcus informed him with a professional smile. Vance Holdings executed a secondary margin call on your hedge fund 30 minutes ago. Your board has officially liquidated your family's shares to cover the deficit. You have exactly 1 hour before the federal auditors freeze your personal accounts. Carter's eyes went completely blank. He didn't say a word. He simply turned and stumbled blindly down the driveway, his expensive shoes splashing through deep puddles as he walked out into the rain with nothing left to his name. I turned my attention to the front doors where Grace stood holding her backpack, her eyes wide as she watched her sister and father unravel. I walked over to her, pulling a small silver key from my pocket and placing it gently into her palm. What is this, Julian? Grace asked softly, her voice trembling slightly. It's the key to a modern 2-bedroom apartment downtown, I said, offering her a warm, genuine smile. The lease is paid in full for the next 4 years, and your college tuition is completely covered through a private foundation fund. Go finish your degree, Grace. Build a life for yourself far away from this house. Tears filled Grace's eyes, but this time they were tears of relief. Thank you, Julian, for everything. Take care of yourself, Grace, I said, pressing her hand closed over the key. I turned away from the porch, ignoring Chloe's hysterical screams and Richard's quiet sobbing as the movers continued clearing out the estate. The rain poured heavily over their ruined lives, washing away 3 years of arrogance, greed, and cruelty in a matter of minutes. I walked down the steps, stepping into the warm, dry back seat of my luxury sedan. Marcus closed the door behind me with a solid, satisfying thud, blocking out the sound of Chloe begging my name. As the car smoothly accelerated down the long driveway, I adjusted Mother's silver watch on my wrist and looked out the window at the estate shrinking in the rearview mirror. A deep sense of absolute peace washed over me. The debt was settled, the slate was clean, and my future was finally entirely my own. "Where to now, Mr. Vance?" Marcus asked from the front seat. I leaned back into the leather seat, taking a slow, deep breath of freedom. "To the office, Marcus," I said quietly. "My real work begins today."